Now I'm assuming that by clicking on this video, you've probably watched the latest Netflix show that is sweeping the world by storm. That's right, we're going to be talking today about Squid Game. And I have a nice big fat glass of wine with me to talk about this show that honestly I feel like everybody and their grandmas and their dogs or their gerbils are watching. So you can't go anywhere online reading articles or even going on YouTube without a video popping up. And do you know what? After a while of talking about this show with my friends and family, I thought if you can't beat them, join them, as the old saying goes. So here I am talking about one of my honestly favorite shows that I've watched recently. Actually, I don't tend to watch a lot of TV. I'm trying to almost wean myself off it because, you know, brainless sitting in front of a TV is no good for anyone. But honestly, after I saw a lot of Korean dramas, I do love a good K-drama and just South Korean cinema in general. As soon as I saw the name Squid Game come up, I thought, worth checking out. And I'm glad I did because it's a really good show, albeit a controversial one. If you've seen a little bit of press around it, there was definitely a lot of hidden messages that you could definitely take away from it. And because of the cult-like following, it's good to know actually, to be able to read between the lines of what I guess the show writers are actually trying to tell you. So that's why I wanted to jump on today onto this channel, talk about something a little bit different as well to, I guess, what I usually do, because I don't think I've ever talked about TV here, and see if these life lessons or messages are things that you picked up yourself. Now, before I get into the key takeaways that I've kind of pinpointed myself, it's probably worth me, as with all good introductions, to start with a little bit of context and background. I hope you have seen the show, because otherwise, spoiler alert for what is coming on. So like, stop watching this, go and watch the series. So as a quick summary of the plot of Squid Game, you start with learning about a guy called Gi-hun. I'm sorry if I butchered the name. He's essentially quite a lazy, well-meaning, but very, very lazy and down on his luck kind of loser guy, really. He doesn't have a job and he therefore lives off of essentially what his mum makes in terms of like a very, very meager income. And he drinks, he gambles a lot, and therefore he is snowballed quite significantly into a mountain of debt. And if that wasn't bad enough already, add on top of the fact that he's a middle-aged man, he's a divorced parent as well, and to make matters worse, his daughter, who actually lives with his ex-wife and actually her new husband, lost a lot of contact and probably a lot of respect because he cannot pay any kind of child support or anything towards her. And then you've obviously got the element of some debt collectors wanting to take one of his kidneys, I believe, right, to actually pay off his debts. He's in a very sticky situation. So what does he go and do? He gets offered the opportunity to compete in these games where he can then win, I think it's several billion won. And he gets this offer from a guy that he meets at a subway station. Very randomly, he plays a game against him. After a lot of painstaking time, he wins and then gets offered a calling card. Ki-hun contemplates this for a while, but of course, the reason we have the show is because he obviously goes to play the game, as do many other contestants, 456 to be precise, because he's the last contestant. And there you go, there is the kind of premise of Squid Game. They are playing just to win this big sum of money, but what people don't realise is when the first game starts, because they've all been told they're going to play childhood games in red light, green light anyway, which in my childhood, as a side note, we called it Grandmother's Footsteps. So I remember this game very well myself, that none of them had any idea that it was going to be to the death. So very Hunger Games, Battle Royale-esque. And something that is also worth mentioning is that while these players are participating in the games, there's also a concurrent investigation that is made by a police officer, I believe it's Jun-ho, who's looking for his brother who's been missing for a while, and he goes in and infiltrates the game. So it makes for a really interesting kind of dynamic, actually. So that is just the wrap up. I think it was a little bit longer than I thought, actually, explaining it to you guys. So let's start with some of the takeaways that I think the show wanted you to leave with. And the first one, obviously, is gonna have to be about money, because, hello, that is why these people are foolish enough or just crazy enough to give away their life. It's just that money makes people do the craziest of things. Gi-hun's life snowballs very quickly out of control because of money, and he's equally willing to snowball and do even crazier things for money. Obviously, the contestants are fighting for their lives to the death because there can only be one winner. That is a big takeaway, certainly, that I think the show creators wanted you to see, but not necessarily in a way that was like promoting money management, but potentially just to say, actually, what would you do for money? And if you were put in Gi-hun's position, wouldn't you do the same thing? And I think it was the front man or even the VIPs, when they're all talking, they actually see this as justified because they're actually doing you a favor by giving you money. And if you're going to be consensually willing to do crazy stuff, then why not? And I believe, even as a side note, that a few years ago, I remember seeing online a story about a potential Hunger Games-esque kind of show that actually was people living in the wilderness fighting to the death. Now, I'm not sure if it was actually produced or not. I would need to look into this, but certainly I would not be surprised if similar things were going on. These ideas, they have to come from somewhere, right? Now, the next takeaway that I think the show creators were trying to instill in the viewer was something that, I don't know, maybe controversial or not, that it was a very big critique on capitalism, okay? I'm just gonna say it how it is because that's how it came across. It basically portrayed everybody rich, so the VIPs, and just the rest of society who weren't in crazy debt, to be very, very evil. And then obviously you contrast that with the contestants that are actually just fighting for their lives and can barely put, 2 cents together. You've got that real big juxtaposition that would create quite a lot of bitterness, certainly as a viewer. That's a feeling that I think is expected of you when you're watching this. It's actually society's fault that, they're in these positions where they need to go and compete for a game show that, costs them their life. Essentially, it's saying the poor people are good people and ennobled, despite the fact that obviously they've done their own fare of lying, stealing, cheating, or whatever. And I guess after a while, you actually start to forget why Gi-hun and his fellow contestants are in the Squid Games. It's interesting that this particular show, Squid Game, being hosted on Netflix, which is obviously very, very Western and banned in many countries like China, probably North Korea as well. They do make comments about North Korea. There was a defector character who said that, when asked, was it worth it to leave, she basically said no, which, come on, let's not lie to ourselves. Does anyone want to be in North Korea? The big markets that this show and just Netflix in general is targeted at, they're Western, and these shows would not even have a chance to be produced in repressive communist or socialist regimes, and you wouldn't even be alive to tell the tale. The whole premise of capitalism is that people at any rung in society are given the chance to have upwards mobility, because by nature capitalism is a trade-off. It's you must give something to get something that you need back. It forces you to be creative, innovative, to work hard. That is why you get a lot of rags to riches stories in Western societies, whereas by contrast, socialist or communist regimes, I mean, look at Cuba. Need I really say more? How's that going? My follow-on key takeaway that I think the show creators wanted to convey is that the West is inherently bad and evil, and by extension, white people are really evil. The VIPs, I think apart from maybe one, were all white, wearing their masks, and you get this typical evil white paymaster who's there laughing and living a lavish lifestyle, watching all these other people suffer. And you even get the sense of Gi-hun demonizing his daughter, or rather his his ex-wife's husband's choice of sending everybody to America to live a better life. And despite the fact that Gi-hun's daughter will probably live a much better quality of life and have better opportunities in America, especially given that Gi-hun cannot afford to pay for child support, you get a real sense that he's quite bitter about it. That's why you kind of really feel sorry for Gi-hun as well, and the situation he's in, because you almost think it's the West's doing. It's the VIPs that are laughing. It's the West that is taking his daughter away from him, when in reality it's not. But it really plays into that idea, like I mentioned, of the white privilege or demonizing white people, which is quite trendy at the moment. You could go into the next key takeaway that I at least felt came out quite strongly anyway, is that by extension, socialism and communism is better, it's for the greater good. And so you get this in a sense, for example, when the contestants play the first game, they have a chance then afterwards to do a vote. And if everybody votes, and it's quite egalitarian, right? If everybody votes that they want to leave, they get to all leave. And there is this real sense throughout the show, even afterwards when they vote to leave, and then they also have a vote potentially to come back, there is a very big emphasis on if the majority agrees, then that's how we go forward. You see then that people are relatively happy and relieved with that element of choice, or at least the illusion of choice, and people even by extension get equal amounts of food and things, they all get the same clothing, everything is the same. But of course, nothing is that black and white, okay? And there are always ways to cheat the system. So for example, the doctor who manages to get hints throughout the show, even though, as a side note, the clues were actually all written on the wall. I don't know if any of you guys noticed that. You also get people who are then stealing the food, so the big gang that goes around stealing the eggs or whatever. Even though everybody's meant to be equal, of course, the animal saying goes, some are more equal than others. And so by nature, promoting socialism or communism, something that's quite nice in theory, but in practice there are always some people that are going to get more than others, and you do see that throughout the show. Even then, as another example, when they are playing that weird glass game, which I'm not sure was that hopscotch, or I don't know really what that was, if you're positioned further back in the queue, you'd actually have a more advantageous, better chance of survival, because the people in front would be the ones making the mistakes, you know? So nothing is truly ever super equal, but that's what the show is essentially trying to convey to you out there, that these are better options, even if death is on the table. Because what you're essentially doing by participating in this game is you are entrusting your life and the actions that follow with that of the game, i.e. the state, if we want to make a nice parallel there. They will feed you, water you, clothe you, etc. But obviously because of the innate inequalities in, I guess, just human nature, there are always ways for people to get out of a truly egalitarian society. And therefore, to me, the whole socialism, communism element, although that was pushed quite a lot, it was, again, a lesson or a takeaway that was a bit lost on me, because by nature, they'd even shown inside the show that it just does not work. But obviously, a flawed socialist or communist society is much better than a capitalist one. It's still the takeaway that you get. Now, the next key message that I think the show creators were trying to instill is one about not needing to take any responsibility or accountability for your own actions. Now, you get this from the get-go, in my opinion, with the character of Gi-hun, because he's basically an irresponsible father to someone who is almost like a hero and is redeemed at the end of the series. And he is a very likable character, I won't lie, in that sense. The writing was quite good. But just because he does some good deeds does not excuse the fact that he was the one who put himself into such a dire position in the first place. He was the one who, I guess, was a failed father, couldn't provide for himself or his family. It's something that you really start to forget when you're watching this. Like, you want to root for this character, and thankfully, obviously, he makes it to the very end, but it comes at a cost. Had he not got himself into millions of wons of debt, he would be living a very relatively normal life with his daughter hopefully in the picture, with his mum not in dire straits. The whole point of capitalism is that you are at liberties to create as much wealth and opportunity as you want, but you got to work for it. You got to take responsibility for things when they go right or when they go wrong. And then the final takeaway that I think the show wanted to convey to the audience was that of normalizing or desensitizing gore and death. Graphic portrayals of everything in life, or even the other sense of just erotic stuff, you're seeing a normalization, I guess, with shows like this, so that actually when you go into episode 9 and you see more dead people, it's something that you don't bat an eyelid against. And actually it's something that I weirdly found myself towards the end of the series wishing that they were playing more games. I think it's even more jarring or eerie when you consider that they are normalizing this death in the context of childhood games, that a lot of us, regardless of where in the world we came from, there are all elements of the games that we find nostalgic in a way. And potentially there are children, whether actively or I guess just by accident, watching this show, that they are growing up in an environment where death is desensitized or even potentially laughed at as enjoyment. I thought the harvesting of bodily organs as well, as a side note, was something that was also a bit dark. Probably quite realistic. I would not be surprised, like I mentioned earlier, if a lot of these things are happening in the world as we speak. Certainly the organ harvesting is something that does happen, I think, on the black market there, but to have it so on the nose in the show was something that I was not expecting in such detail. I don't know, in the wrong hands that could really throw you for a loop mentally. So that is a big, I guess, takeaway that I don't think a lot of people would realise, but if you watch a lot of shows like this, even with Parasite being quite gory, it's something just to be aware of, just to see where the current of TV is really taking us these days. So anyways, those were the key lessons that I think the creators of Squid Game wanted us to know. Now let's get into the actual lessons that I took away myself then after digesting the whole show and everything else. So the big one, obviously, around money that I mentioned before, is something that I'll mention here as well, around don't get yourself into debt. By nature, a luxury YouTuber, creator is something that maybe doesn't necessarily come out so often, because maybe it looks like if you watch a lot of these videos and it's an echo chamber of luxury stuff where money just seems to, you know, come and go very easily. The fact that, you know, money is so fleeting, it's also where you can get in trouble. So even if you're having good times, be responsible with it, because I think we could all agree that we like having two kidneys. And then the second key takeaway or life lesson that I personally took away is, again, relating to money, because it was obviously a big subject. And while money can help you get certain opportunities or allow you certain freedoms, it's also something that can be the root of a lot of evils. And you can see a lot of bad human nature come out when money is on the table. Rest in peace, Ali. And it's a shame that money brings out the worst in a lot of people. And even today, in popular culture or otherwise, people do the craziest stuff for money. People end friendships and, you know, stop speaking to certain family members because of money, and behave in crazy ways towards strangers because of it as well. And you really do see that in the show as a follow-on message, actually, to that particular point of money being the root of all evil. I think it's fair to say that in the same vein, money can also not buy you happiness. It's really shown by the way that Gi-hun is living in the exact way that he used to after a year since the game ended. He's not spent much of his money, which, as a side note, I'm not sure how that's actually possible. And I think that's something that a lot of people in today's world tend to forget when they see celebrities and influencers living their best life, so to speak. It's not necessarily a reflection of reality, and he's probably one of the richest people in the world in the show at that time, but he feels no better because of it. And what he's lost, was it really worth it? Now, another lesson that I think was very important, and I alluded to it a little bit earlier, is that you should take responsibility for yourself, your actions, and especially for those that are really relying on you or dependent on you for your help. And you should be very, very transparent and open in terms of communicating if you also need help and you're unable to shoulder the responsibilities that you bear, because it can lead to some crazy stuff. Cue Squid Game. People don't expect you to take responsibility for your actions or anything. You're seeing that in society as well today. Just entrust another establishment to make the decisions for you. All the pain and suffering could have been avoided, even though it's, you know, not what we'd as a viewer want, because we wouldn't be having a show to watch here. In terms of real life, if you get yourself into a sticky situation, you're the one that has to own the decisions, and you have to own the consequences of your actions. You can blame the front man, you can blame the VIPs all you want, but at the end of the day, you were the one that consensually signed the contract, Gi-hun, to go and play in this game. You did have an opportunity to leave, you didn't. So actually, just take responsibility for that, really. And now for a lesson that is a bit more tongue-in-cheek and something that I hope is obvious to many people, but don't get into a stranger's van. Tell people where you're going, okay? Whether that be Gi-hun and all of his, friends or whatever, fellow contestants, telling people that, you know, I'm going to compete in this game. They all went missing and no one really batted an eyelid, so I'm assuming not that many because of the shame of money and stuff. Talk to someone, whether that be someone you know or someone that's a bit more independent or impartial. But be transparent about where you're going, because if you get bundled up in a guy's van, you don't know if they're going to be harvesting organs the next morning. It's not worth the secrecy and the shame to then potentially have this crazy stuff happen to you. So always tell people where you're going, especially even the police officer. I think that was one of the dumbest things that he could have done. As someone in the law enforcement, you should always get back up. Imagine the dynamic if there was another person also working as one of the employees, how that would have been very interesting. But that aside, let's move on to another key lesson here, shall we? Another one I think that is a bit more profound actually is just be grateful for the life that you have. Chances are if you're living in the Western world, you're already quite privileged, and I certainly count my blessings every day for what I have. It's very easy and tempting to talk about the have-nots rather than the haves. And food, shelter, if you think of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, these basic needs actually are things that actually a lot of people in the world don't necessarily have, and we probably take it for granted. And it just goes to show you actually when they're playing the Squid Games that what they've actually lost in terms of some people, their friends, their family, even their life. Is it really worth it? I mean, you've got the couple that, the husband, sorry to be so blunt about it, but the husband killed himself when he had to essentially say goodbye to his wife when they were playing those marble games. I mean, did they both, first of all, need to enter the games? Probably not. Don't wait until it's too late to be grateful for what you once had, because chances are what you have actually is mostly first world problems and could be easily solvable if you took accountability for things and actually decided to make a change. Now, another profound lesson that I took away from the show is that everything can change. Money can come and go, people can come and go, and situations, while they might seem bad now, can be better in the future. Nothing stays the same forever. And I think all of us can agree in moments, specifically in time, where we thought this is the worst thing that could ever happen. But things have to objectively get better at some point. They can't always be bad. And you get a sense after Gi-hun wins the games and goes back that, his daughter's gone, his mum has sadly passed. And I think that's something that, while on the face of it can sound quite depressing potentially or negative, there's also a positive connotation if you take accountability for yourself and if you do the right thing, that things can change for the better. And you do see that from Gi-hun's improvement a year later, and you see that with the North Korean defector whose name I forgot, but her little brother gets actually taken care of by Sung-woo's mum. And then the final lesson that I have, that I took away myself, of the myriad that it seems that I've come up with, don't believe what you are told just on surface level. I know that might sound elusive, but when it comes to the show, just understand what our undercurrents are there that are being, instilled in the audience. There's got to be a reason why this show, of the many brilliant South Korean shows and films, why this one has suddenly made it to the top. Obviously, I'm not doubting its brilliant screenwriting and all of that business, but it's interesting to me that this one is being promoted quite heavily, and it really shot to fame. And you've got to wonder why that is, and you've got to also wonder why certain messages peppered throughout the series are really coming to the fore. I think it's a trend that's happening with a lot of Netflix shows at the moment. If you've seen You recently, season 3, you'll know what I mean. You've got to, I guess, be quite discerning in understanding why certain pieces of information are portrayed. That was everything I wanted to chat to you guys about in this video. Overall, it was a beautifully made show. The symmetry, the colours and everything, it was so satisfying to watch. Great acting, great storylines, character development, even though there was a lot of chat. I think it's great to see world cinema really embraced, and I hope to see more of it. The politics element was a little bit meh, not gonna lie, kind of similar to Parasite really, the whole critique on the West and capitalism, which we should all be grateful for in the West, that we have an ability to critique actually. But I am really looking forward on the whole to what season 2 will have to offer. I'm really hoping, as a side note, that Jun-ho, the police officer, is not dead. You don't see him die on camera. I hope that he will team up with Gi-hun, because Lord knows how on earth Gi-hun is going to infiltrate the Squid Games again. They know he's coming. I'm not sure how that will work exactly, because that will be a very short series otherwise. They could just kill him instantly. It'll be interesting to see them team up, given there's no one else surviving to do that. And yeah, I'm looking forward to, in a way, what other childhood games are going to be there. It's definitely changed the way that I think of childhood games, and it's definitely also going to change Halloween's from now on as well. Let me know what key takeaways you resonate with, or indeed if I've missed any as well. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you in my next one.